All right, hey everybody. Today I want to talk with you about one of my most exciting topics, I think. It's very interesting, it's cool, and it's the CSS version, or the CSS part of a website. So when you make your web pages, right now we're at the very beginning, very basic stuff. We're just marking up like paragraphs, headers, what's an image, what's a link, an anchor, unmarked lists. But we haven't really said, okay, now be a specific color or be a specific font or typeface. We haven't said be a specific width or height or fill this much of the screen. We haven't done anything like that. CSS is what's going to do that. It's the style, it's the styling or the way the page is going to render or look to the viewer versus the code that tells the computer kind of the hierarchical structure of a page. And so in this lesson, we're going to begin with the very introductory kind of overview of these elements and what they are. When you do this, you have to remember you have to create, we're going to do it by creating a separate page, a separate what's called a style sheet, an external style sheet that is going to be pointed to from our HTML page. So every web page that you create will be saying, now go up in the head region, we're going to code it in the head region. The head region is going to say, oh, okay, there's a style sheet associated with this. We're going to go find it. It's relative to the document that I'm currently in, so it's going to look within the folder or wherever you direct it to look. But it's going to go find that document, and then it's going to take the document, all of the settings that you have done, the attributes, they're called selectors, and it's going to then say, okay, the paragraph needs to look like this, and it needs to have these attributes, and a header needs to look like this. And when we get into tables, the table attribute, the header of the table, and the cell of or the row of the table, and all that. And it gets into be quite a significant amount of content and information. However, we're just going to start with the very beginning. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to begin with, as we have in the past, the last lesson, so project 2. As you go through the notes, you're going to see that there are important things that you've got to do when you are working with CS. First of all, when you're using CSS, we want to make sure we write it in the proper syntax. There's a way to do it that is appropriate. I'm going to go over that. But the core elements of what we're doing is that this separates style from presentation, the style and the presentation from the actual content of the code. So we've got HTML, but then we use the CS to manipulate the HTML. The HTML is just going to sit there, but whenever we change that style, then it's going to change everything, every paragraph that's associated with it. So if you have one style sheet and 10 pages of, say 10 web pages, you just change that one style sheet. If they're all pointing to that CSS sheet, then all of them are updated instantly. And so that's the beauty of it. You can change and manipulate and modify lots and lots and lots of things by changing one document instead of having to go into every HTML page and change every little part. That would be a nightmare and really, really hard to manage. It's already hard enough to manage like just simple links and things like that when you change them from page to page if something changes. So having to change all the colors, type, and all of that would just be crazy. One of the best examples of CSS in action is the Zen Garden. Zen Garden demonstrates how you take the same exact HTML code and restylize it using just changing the style sheet. So the whole idea of this is you can quickly modify your entire website by simply just updating the style sheet. And so when you look at these examples, it will basically keep the same elements, the same type of information, but just change the CSS for it. And you can see there's just a huge variety of things that you can do with all this. You can choose and to look at the different examples. You can look up the different types and just kind of see. They all say, all the web pages stay the same or say the same things, but they just style it differently. So you can go to the Zen Garden, the CSS Zen Garden website, and you can check that out. That's on the web page here, and you can look at these different things. And to try, it just basically puts it in perspective. When you do CSS, there's 3 different ways you can do it. You can do what's called an external style sheet, an embedded style sheet, and an inline. They're different in the approach. An external style sheet is separate, is a separate document. The embedded style sheet is going to still be within the HTML page, and the inline is going to still be within the HTML page. It's just going to be very, very specific. We're going to just begin with the external style sheet because it's a little more specific on how you get the content to link together. So again, the idea of the style sheet is to make sure that if it's external, you see that lots of documents can connect to it. You can have lots of pages. If it's on your HTML page, then you've still got to transfer that information from one page to another page to another page to another page. And most of the time, you don't want to have to do that. You want it to be very simple. So here's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at, you're going to create a new document. Now, it's not going to be a .html page like we did before, like project1.html. It's going to be a .css. And usually we call it main or CSS. I like to call it usually like you could call it a style sheet. I call it, I've made multiple style sheets for different things. I might want to style a specific element, or I have 2 different pages. Like for my schedule, I have a style sheet, and for my syllabus, I have a style sheet, something like that. But we can call it main or style sheet or whatever the instructions want us to call it, or however you want to do it. I usually will do like a main CSS .css. So we're going to begin by doing that. So in the head of your code, of your HTML code, you're going to say link. The reference to it is going to be stylesheet.css, and that's going to be the document, the separate document in your folder. Relationship is going to be a style sheet, type equals text / CSS. And all of that needs to be in the head region of your HTML page. So here I have my project. This is project 2. So you can see if I were to open this with Chrome, it has no style on it. It's my simple pages as you've seen before with my link to my image from the internet. What we're going to end up doing is adding to the HTML page. So this is what the page looks like rendered as HTML with a browser. The code for it is simply going to be, I'm going to open this up with Notepad so we can just look at the basic code. I've got my doc type, I've got my HTML language, English. Here's the head region where I want to add my code for the CSS. Now, I don't have a CSS sheet made yet. I can make my CSS sheet. I'll go ahead and say, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to say new text document. I'm going to put in quotes. Oh, it won't let me do it this way. So I'm just going to open this up. There's nothing in it. I'm going to say file, new, or I'm going to say save as, and I'm going to put in quotes, stylesheet.css. I said I was going to put it in quotes because I want this to be a CSS document. Now I could name it whatever I wanted to, but as long as I have CSS at the end, let me pull this up here, it's going to save. So here's my stylesheet.css. I want to make sure I've got it in the right spot. So here it is. I want to make a link to it. So what I'm going to do is I can type it in, or I can go to my example here. I always refer to notes, or I go to my W3 for something I can't remember. But let's just do this. I'm going to copy this link, my ref stylesheet.css, relative style sheet, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that in my HTML page in the head. Remember to indent, keep things organized. I'm going to say File, Save. Now, nothing is going to happen just yet, and we want to make sure, I always want to test things out to make sure things are going to work properly. So the first thing we're going to look at is what I want to look at is kind of changing an attribute so that I can see the change. So in this particular case, I'm going to look at my syntax so we can kind of look at this. When we start working with this, we have to have what's called a selector, which is going to be an HTML element. So in this particular case, the selector is going to be a P for paragraph. It could be, when we get into this, you're going to see it could be a H1, a U. When we get further into it, it's going to be header regions, and it's going to be divs, and we're going to work with those kinds of things. So what we have is we're going to have the selector. We're going to have curly brackets that contain the properties, and then we're going to have our property declaration with our property and then the value. And so this is what it's going to look like. So if we wanted to say change a paragraph or change other attributes, let's go down and look at, I have a chart here. So let's say we're going to change the H1 element. Let's go ahead and let's just test this out. First thing I like to do is just kind of test it out. First thing you want to do is actually put like comments on your sheet. So in this area, I'm going to use // and an asterisk, and then I always open and close in the same time. So I'm going to do an asterisk and a /. And in that, I'm going to put in my comments. So CSS by Derek Dallas, just as a way to kind of notate what I've got. Now I'm going to test this out by just adjusting an H1 element. So since the H1 element is a predefined element within HTML, I don't have to do anything except say just H1. So I'm choosing the selector. I'm selecting H1. Then I want a left curly bracket, and I'll give myself some space, and a right curly bracket. Now everything about H1, everything about it is going to go in this space. Okay? So when we have different properties, like we're going to have text align, we can tell it where to align. We can put in something like text spacing, and we can align it. So for this example, the H4, any H4 on the page is going to be aligned to the right and have a letter spacing of 5 pixels. Here's another example. H4 text aligned to the right, letter spacing of 5 pixels, and a color of FF0000. And that's a hexadecimal value. We'll talk about it in a second. These are web safe colors, and so if we were to take these attributes, first thing I want to do is let's just see if we can change the color, because the color is the simple